Thanks for tuning in. Today I want to share my top tips for shopping at Hermes in Hawaii, specifically Oahu, because I have been getting some questions on shopping through an SA that is out of state. I've also been fortunate enough to be able to add a lot of pieces from the Hawaii boutique, and I thought it would be really helpful to consolidate all of my answers to those questions, as well as my top tips and how to plan your trip, how to approach it, all of that good stuff into one dedicated video. And I have quite a bit to get through, so I want to jump right into it. For those of you tuning in for the first time, hi, I'm Katie. I like to do these luxury fashion videos here on YouTube. I share hauls and reviews, but at the end of the day, I share my journey so we can all mindfully curate our own collections. So if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment down below with your favorite part. All of your support really means a lot to me. I have been really fortunate to be able to shop and add some really wonderful pieces from the Hawaii boutique. Actually, all of my major handbags are actually from Hawaii, and a lot of my other purchases are through my local boutique. I do have an SA that I work with at a local boutique here in New York City. New York City actually has 3 boutiques. I know, pretty excessive. And so I work with an SA at one of those boutiques, and consistently throughout the year, I will work with the same person to make those purchases. I have also had conversations around handbags that I want to add and my whole wish list, all of that good stuff. So my SA in New York City is fully aware of that and is actively working to help me on that regard as well. Before I made my trip out to Hawaii, I was fortunate enough to be able to connect with her, and I do have a really good, pretty candid relationship with her as well. And I mentioned that I'm actually going on vacation to Hawaii, and when she heard that, she was like, oh my gosh, you should check out the boutique over there. I've heard some good stories of other clients that have had good luck there, and I know they get a lot of inventory, so you should definitely check it out. So some of you were asking if I had felt weird about, cheating on my SA by going to a different boutique and purchasing through somebody else. But actually, my New York City SA was encouraging me to go check out the other boutiques while I'm there. So I can't say every single person is going to be the same, but I was able to have that conversation before I left, so I went with no guilt on my shoulders, basically. So why Hawaii? First of all, there are 2 boutiques on Oahu. There's one on Waikiki, the main kind of shopping strip on Waikiki, and there is one in the Ala Moana Center, which is a large open-air shopping center. So there are 2 stores, which means there are 2 different stores that get different inventory, and you sort of automatically increase your chances of being able to find something that fits what you're looking for because you have 2 different locations. The other reason is, according to my SA, the Hawaii stores, Waikiki first and then Ala Moana, are the stores that actually get really good inventory. Sometimes they're even better than Beverly Hills and New York City, she said. So that's why she was like, maybe it's not a Birkin or a Kelly, but they might have like a Kelly dance or something interesting there that it would be worth checking out because they do get so much inventory. That was according to my SA, and based on my experience, I do think that is a pretty true statement as well. And last but not least, I do think the Hawaii boutiques are pretty familiar with transient or tourist clientele. So it's not strange to bring up, wanting to get a Birkin or a Kelly pretty early on in your conversation. You don't necessarily have to have an extensive profile built out with the boutique before you're able to broach those topics, because they know you're not here for months and months and months at a time. They know you're here maybe for a week, for a few days. They're much more receptive to those questions and also helping you out. So those are my main reasons for purchasing in Hawaii. And for logistical purposes, I do think the Hawaii boutique much prefers having at least an initial in-person interaction before they're really going to be working with you pretty extensively through online or virtually. So I don't know how well the relationship can get built entirely virtually. So I say all of that to mean it does require at least one in-person visit to be able to establish that relationship, and then you can take it virtual from there. If you want to take advantage of the Hawaii tax rate, which may be lower than where you live, if you live in mainland, then you do have to make the purchase in Hawaii. If they were to ship it to a location, then you would be charged the shipping location tax. So for example, if I purchased it in Hawaii, it would be 4.7% tax. If I got it shipped, I'd be charged the New York City tax, which is 8.875. So those are just some like logistical considerations as well. So my top tips for shopping in Hawaii. First is to plan to go for several days or visits or different times. So definitely go early on in your trip. If you're staying for a few days, definitely make sure to make an initial visit early on. So that gives you a few more days. That gives you a little bit more time to continue the conversation, to have follow-up visits, and perhaps for inventory to get delivered to the boutique. And that all increases your chances of being able to find a piece that you're looking for. Like, this is a disclaimer across everything that I'm saying. Like, none of this actually guarantees that it's going to happen. A lot of it does depend on the actual inventory that's available. Sometimes it does depend on the person that you're working with and whether you jive and all of that stuff. You know, there's no guarantee, but these are definitely things that I would consider, especially, you know, if I'm planning for a trip and I want to make the most out of my time there. From my experience, every time I go to Hawaii, I actually end up going to the boutique multiple times. I personally enjoy that because I'm able to see all of the things that are there. Sometimes there are deliveries that happen after the fact, and so there are new things or more sizes or things like that that become available later on. And sometimes there are things that I will initially see, I'll let it marinate a little bit, and then I decide I want to get it. And so all of that gives me time to be able to make purchases or even returns or exchanges, because I did that recently. I changed the color of this twilly, so it gives you time to do all of those things and not feel really rushed to have to make a purchase in a short amount of time. From my experience, the first visit is really to get a sense of what you like and what you're looking for. This most recent trip, I focused on wanting to get some specific items that were on my list that were not handbags necessarily. So those were the Chippery sandals. It was the Rodeo Pegasus. I did want to take a look at the bolide style. I also wanted to take a look at ready-to-wear and things like that. So I focused a lot of that first trip on taking a pretty general browse throughout the boutique and being able to pick up some other things that I knew I wanted to get across those different categories. And naturally, in that kind of session of browsing is where I was able to bring up the colors that I was looking for, the types of bags, things like that. And then it's after that first visit where I was pretty much brought in for another visit. And then I actually came back a third time because we wanted to focus that session on looking at men's bags. So I would definitely plan for it spanning multiple days, and going on early on in your trip is going to be really advantageous for that. My second shopping tip is to be flexible in what you're looking for. Perhaps have several color families in mind, have different sizes in mind, maybe even different styles. I know a lot of times we'll have a notion of what we think our dream bag is, and it can be really specific. For instance, it could be a black Kelly 25 Cellier with gold hardware. Like 100% you already know that's really what you're looking for. If there is really no compromise on any element of that, and you're really steadfast on making sure that's the piece that you add, then absolutely, like, stick to your guns and stay true to only really looking for that, and don't compromise for anything else. As an example, let me share like what I described when I was getting these two bags, and these happened at different times, mind you. So the first one I was able to add was my Jean Ombre Birkin. When I was bringing up the topic of my general wish list, I did share some general color families that I wanted to add. Actually, I told her at the time that I was looking to add a neutral handbag in like a Birkin size 30 or 25, or a Kelly size 25 or 28. But almost as like a joke, I added, you know, oh, but I might be able to be convinced to get a pop of color like yellow. actually said that. And so I think because I left that option open of being able to get a yellow bag, that's why this is what came out. And actually when I saw it, I really loved it and I knew I wanted to get it. More recently, in adding the Kelly 25 touch to my collection, on the first visit, when the SA asked me, well, actually, she never specifically said what kind of bag. She just said, what colors are you looking for? And I said, you know, I'm looking for maybe like a green, but like a earthy green or a muted green, not a bright green, or maybe even a red color tone, but also more muted, more earthy, you know, not too bright. Maybe even blue, but also gold. Those were the colors that I said at the first meeting, that at the first kind of interaction we had. And based on that, I think that's where she initially brought out that gold Birkin 30. If it's more helpful to think about it in a more structured framework, then I would prioritize these 4 different dimensions to figure out which areas you're willing to compromise and which areas you're not willing to compromise. And those 4 main dimensions are color, size, leather, hardware. And I can't take any credit for any of this. I have a wonderful friend on Instagram who DM'd me. We were having this kind of conversation and gave me this wonderful idea of structuring it this way, which I think is pretty brilliant. So thank you very much. You know who you are. I do think it's actually a really great way to think about the components that are really going to make up this bag. For my most recent trip and where my collection is right now, of those 4 dimensions, what mattered the most to me, first and foremost, was size. If it wasn't going to fit those sizes, then I was ready to say no. The next priority was going to be color, because I was looking for some specific colors to add to my collection, but I did have some flexibility. I wasn't steadfast on one specific color. I wasn't even prioritizing one color group over the other. So that's where I introduced some element of flexibility. Hardware sort of couples with the color. There are some specific colors that I get specific on the hardware. So for example, like a red family, I much prefer it to be with palladium hardware. But when it comes to like the green family of colors, I didn't mind whether it's gold or palladium. You know, there's also a little bit of flexibility there. The least priority for me was the leather, because sure, I have my preferences, but it wasn't going to completely break it for me. So that's how I walked in, and based on the colors that I shared, right, those greens, reds, maybe blues, but a gold I'm also looking for. I think based on that, that's why the SA brought out the gold Birkin 30 in Togo leather with palladium hardware, which was absolutely gorgeous. She was listening to everything that I said, and she did actually address one of the specific colors that I did mention. We never talked about actual bag size or hardware or leather type. It was really, the conversation really only happened around color. Because it was a Birkin 30, it checked the size criteria that I was not willing to compromise on. It did meet the color criteria as well as the hardware. And the leather, because I didn't have too much preference, it was okay. So ideally, the Birkin 30, the gold Birkin 30 was actually pretty perfect. It fit all of my criteria. But when I actually saw it in person, as beautiful as it was, I realized the likeness of that bag was way too similar to my Jean Ombre Birkin here. The size is the same. That's not really what bothered me too much, but I think it was the type of color and the leather combination that just made it so similar. I think even if it was a different leather, it would have added an interesting element to it and I would have been more drawn to it. But because it was Togo leather, which is very similar to Clemence leather, I just wasn't getting that yummy feeling. That's why ultimately, even though it checked all of the boxes, I ended up saying no, because in person I saw it and I just wasn't feeling it. I also knew that someone would be so thrilled to have that piece that I wanted that person to have that because they were going to enjoy it so much more than I was. So after I said no, the SA and I started having more conversations. I started to ask, oh, is there anything like in that green family or anything in the red family, any Birkin 25s? And she was like, no, unfortunately, no. And then she was thinking, and then she asked me, oh, would you be interested in black? And I said, oh yeah, but if it's smaller. only if it's smaller. I'm not interested in like, you know, a 35 in a black. Or even really a 30. But that's when she's like, are you interested in a Kelly? And I said, yep, Kelly is fine too. Then that's when she was like, okay, hold on a minute. I think I have a Kelly 25. Let me go get it. And that's when this came out. So we didn't even really get to a lot of specifics. She didn't know that I actually wanted my Kelly to be a cellier style. That was really the only kind of Kelly that I wanted. She didn't know that. The black wasn't a color that I initially mentioned, but it fit my size criteria. I was flexible on the colors, and this was actually a neutral. This is actually what I would have created if I were ever fortunate enough to do a special order. I always thought that I would do a Birkin 25 in black with a touch of exotic on the handles and the sangles. That was actually what I thought would be my special order. So it pretty much was that in a Kelly version, but it fit the size of Kelly 25. It fit my preference of a cellier style. I had no preference of hardware, and I had no preference for leather really. So this fit the criteria, and it gave me that yummy feeling. So I knew that this was the one to add. But see how that whole exchange is like an entire journey, and because there is some flexibility built into that search process, I was able to get something. I was able to have more conversations with the SA to navigate the available inventory basically, and find a piece that is very close to, if not what I'm looking for. I feel like if I approached it where I was like, I only want a blue Nui Birkin 25, you know, with palladium hardware, like that's going to be really difficult to make sure you have. And then I feel like when you come in with such a strong stance of like, oh, this is exactly what I want, it gets a lot harder for the SA to make recommendations on similar styles, because it feels like you're not really going to budge. Sometimes you might not be willing to budge, and like I said, that's totally okay as well. But I think before you go, it's helpful for you to take a little bit of time to think about what areas you have a little bit of wiggle room on or some flexibility, and what areas you know you're just not going to get if it doesn't fit, you know, those specific dimensions or criteria. The more things you have in the flexible bucket, I think the more likely it is that something that makes your heart sing is going to come home with you. Also, going back to that kind of framework, you know, and those 4 dimensions, I do think the priority of those will change over time. So now that I added this piece, for instance, for the next handbag that I'm looking to add, you know, maybe size isn't the biggest priority anymore. Maybe it's color. Maybe I am specifically looking, I'm making this up, but looking to add a blue color family handbag to my collection. Maybe let's say I'm really looking to add an exotic, full exotic handbag to my collection. That makes leather the most important criteria that I'm not going to budge on, right? So I do think it makes sense that the priority will evolve as you build out your collection. It might change with every single visit. I think it can be a really great framework to make sure you know what you're looking for, and you don't just get something for the sake of getting it because it was offered to you when you went to the boutique. My last shopping tip is actually, don't be afraid to say no to something. I know rejecting something is really difficult. It can feel really negative, but actually I find that a lot of the Hermes essays in particular use that as an additional data point to better understand what you're looking for. Yeah, I said no to the gold Birkin, and that's what prompted us to have a little bit more conversation on maybe what I'm looking for. Sometimes you have an idea of what you think you want, and when you see it in person, it doesn't manifest in the way that you thought it would, because it's not like we can just go to the store and see all the colors, see all the options in real life, and then pick, you know, which one we want. A lot of times it's based off of pictures or based off of our own sort of imagination of what it might look like. So don't be afraid to say no. I don't think it's going to be the case where, you know, especially in Hawaii, where they then like take it so personally, get so offended, and never show you anything again. It's really just an additional data point for them to know what you're looking for and then make better recommendations going forward. All right, so those are all of my top tips for shopping at Hermes in Hawaii, specifically in Oahu. I don't actually know if there are any other boutiques on any of the other islands, but I figured I'd be very specific. Again, none of this 100% guarantees that it's going to happen, but I do think if you keep these tips in mind while you plan your trip, that it will increase your chances for coming home with something that you're really looking for. So the magic doesn't happen all the time. Even while I was there and posting little sneak peeks, people were DMing me saying like they were just recently there and the magic didn't happen for them, and that's also possible as well. So my other big tip is to really go with no expectation, and then a lot of times you will be pleasantly surprised. This is just a side note question for those of you who made it this far in the video. This is the Tea Time Twilly, the Hermes Tea Time Twilly that I got while I was in Hawaii recently, and because it is a touch and the handle is croc, I don't think it makes sense to really wrap the handle in the twilly. So I did try putting it as like a little ribbon. I don't think I'll put this on all the time because I do think it makes the handbag really girly, and that's not always the mood I'm going for, but like, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like the ribbon on it? Does it look cute? Does it look strange? Does it look out of place? I don't know. You guys let me know. I need your help on figuring this one out. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions on any of the tips or anything that I shared. Feel free to leave them down below or head on over to Instagram and I'd be happy to help however I can. If you like this video and you found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate all of your feedback and support. If you like this kind of content and you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I post new fashion related videos every Sunday and Wednesday. So until next time,